Do you need a break?
You read my mind.
Come with me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Break, and Merry Christmas. I'm Father Roderick, and this is recorded on the third day of Christmas. As you know, Catholics celebrate Christmas for an entire week during the octave of Christmas. And this is the show that is all about that wonderful time of the year. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, last week I was in Rome, and even though I put out an episode of The Walk, I was unable to record an episode of The Break, and that was simply for technical reasons. I only had my phone with me that served as my audio recorder and my video recorder and my photo camera. It's amazing for the first time, I think, since I started this work in the media, to be traveling with just a phone as my equipment. No laptop, no cameras, no lenses, no chargers, just a phone. It was amazing. However, the one thing that I discovered was that the phone itself, even though it is fantastic for photography and filming, for audio, it's a bit of a challenge because it only records in mono, which was already a challenge when I was recording last week's episode of The Walk, because I usually really like it when it's stereo sound, especially if you're walking around in Rome where there's so much ambient sound. However, thanks to a Dolby app, I was able to make that sound a little bit more spatial than just mono. But for The Break, with the jingles and all the various segments, it was just not feasible on the phone itself. So next year, if I'm going to do more traveling, I want to figure out a way to use my phone as a main recording device, but also to have the ability to play jingles and to have a slightly better sound, maybe with an external microphone. We'll figure it out. But for now, that's why you are listening to this Christmas episode after Christmas. Even though for Catholics, as you know, and I mentioned that in the introduction, it's Christmas for 8 days. The octave in Latin, that's the word for the number 8. So for 8 days, literally, at least from a liturgical point of view, every day is Christmas. This is also why a lot of the prayers are exactly the same for 8 days, which kind of gets old after a while, if I'm totally honest. But anyway, the idea is that time stands still for 8 days. I like that about the Catholic tradition. It's like, it's not just, oh, it's Christmas Day and then it's over. No, it just continues for a week, because that's how important Christmas is. So in this particular episode of The Break, I want to talk a lot about the Christmas topics, and even for Star Wars, I found a Christmas topic. So let's talk about Star Wars.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
And today, I want to give you my review of something that I should have watched 3 years ago, and I don't understand why I didn't watch it. I discarded it. I was like, yeah, it's Star Wars, but still, it's for kids. It's just not for me. I'm not going to watch that. It won't work. I watched it yesterday evening, and I thought it was one of the best things I've ever seen when it comes to Christmas plus Star Wars. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the new Star Wars Lego Holiday Special. It came out in 2020, so that's 3 years ago. And it was almost one of those early ideas that they came up with when Disney Plus was brand new, when they were still trying to find, people's interest. And of course, Netflix was already around. Amazon Prime was around with video. And so Disney had to fight its way into the general perception. And they were just throwing so much stuff against the wall, see what sticked. And with Star Wars, it was the same. They still had tons of money that they wanted to invest in all these new productions. And so while they were brainstorming, and this I read this in an article that came out, I think, last week, about the history of this holiday special. They were talking amongst each other, like, what can we do with Star Wars? We should do something with, like, one of those holiday specials. And a lot of the people that worked at Lucasfilm and in the creative department around the Star Wars franchise, they reminisced about certain holiday specials that they had watched as a kid, and that then, from then on, became almost like a staple thing to watch during Christmas. And I think we all have those television episodes or certain movies that we watch over and over again. I'm not just talking about Die Hard, but there are certain experiences. Like for me, it's the Muppet Christmas movie, the Christmas Carol with the Muppets. I watched that when I was relatively young. I think I might have already been in seminary. I'm not sure, but I also had the Christmas album with John Denver and the Muppets, full of Muppet versions of the Christmas songs. And so that for me, Christmas is so tied to the Muppets. And I noticed that, in fact, there is a new version of the Muppet Christmas movie that is out on Disney Plus. And they actually restored a song that had been left out in all previous versions, which is a wonderful, wonderful song. And so that's also on my list. That's another reason that I like the Catholic tradition of celebrating Christmas for 8 days. You have 8 days to catch up on all the Christmas movies because, of course, since I'm a priest, I'm kind of busy during Christmas time. I had like a midnight mass. Well, it wasn't really at midnight, but it ended way past midnight. And then, of course, the next day we have the official like Christmas Day morning celebrations. I have my hands full during the actual Christmas days. Then I completely passed out because I was so tired because of the weekend in Rome. If you listen to my my episode of The Walk, you hear me explain why I'm so tired. It's basically I've been running around every single day for more than 10 hours. Always on my feet. I walked, I think every day I walked between 15 and 20 kilometers. I did everything by foot. I only took the metro like 5 times because I had a ticket for 5 individual rides. And I walked all the rest. But I was staying in one side of Rome, and in order to get to the center of Rome, it was about an hour to go there, and then of course also an hour to go back. So anyway, that in addition to the fact that I was staying in a monastic community, and they woke up super early. They had morning prayers and mass and breakfast starting at 6:30, which was so early. And then the bed was very, very tough. It was like no comfort whatsoever. So I just didn't get enough sleep, and I spent a lot of energy. Now, it was all worth it. And if you're among my patrons that have access to the premium episodes, so I'm giving like early access to the recordings that I made in Rome. We are working on actually bringing back the Catholic Insider, which was the podcast that I started in 2005. That's how old that podcast is. And I've been doing this for more than a decade. And I recently decided to bring new episodes to the series. But the series as such, as a podcast series, is no longer online. So we're working on bringing that back online, but that takes time to set up. Also has to do with some behind the scenes work that we're doing on our website and the way we distribute our content. So that's going to take a bit more time, but for the patrons, I make that already available. So recorded a ton of podcasts, and I'm just still recovering from that. That plus Christmas, I just feel like I'm still working. And actually I am, because I'm recording this for you, the show that I should have recorded last week. So once my podcasts are out of the way, we have one final day of work tomorrow, and then for me, the Christmas time starts, and I have a couple of days where I really plan on not doing anything but reading and playing video games. So back to the Christmas holiday special. There are a certain number of movies and TV shows that I want to watch. One of these things that I love around Christmas time is, of course, the Doctor Who Christmas special. I never miss those. And so there's a new one out. Haven't seen it yet. Looking forward to that one. And then, of course, you've got the Star Wars holiday special. Now, the original one was aired on TV in the 70s when Star Wars was still very new, and also Lucasfilm and George Lucas himself didn't know very well how to handle the marketing around the movies. And so they decided to air a holiday special, which was done like a very low budget SNL type of show, where it was various segments. All of them were meant to be humorous, but a lot of the jokes just fall flat because bad writing. There's even Carrie Fisher singing a song, and she has a lot of talents, but singing is not one of them. You had guys dressed up as Wookiees. There was the very famous short animated clip that features the first apparition of Boba Fett without the holiday special. I shouldn't say Christmas special, because it was called holiday special. Boba Fett wouldn't have been part of the Star Wars saga. Can you imagine that? And so that's how they brought Boba Fett into the world of Star Wars. But all in all, Lucasfilm has tried for more than a decade to let people forget about that holiday special, because that's how awful it was. It's still available if you're curious, but beware, don't say I didn't warn you. You can still watch it on YouTube. There are some copies on YouTube that show the full thing, and then you will understand why Lucasfilm has never tried to restore like a quality version of that, and it's not featured on Disney Plus. There's a very good reason. However, they came up with this idea. Well, what if we do like a new version of the holiday special? And why don't we work with the guys over at, they had the Lego deal, so they could do animated shorts featuring Lego, Star Wars Lego. I'm sure that's part of the back and forth of, Lego can make sets based on Star Wars, and then Star Wars can use Lego for their content on Disney Plus. And they came up with this idea, well, what if we take the best ingredients of a holiday special and we create a version with Star Wars Lego? That will give us a lot of leeway, because we don't have to stick to canon. We don't have to feature actors, maybe just voice actors. And we can make it funny and something that you can watch with the entire family. And maybe, if it's good enough, this also will become one of those traditional specials that people will watch every year for Christmas. And that is also why I never cared for it, because I was like, yeah, it's Star Wars Lego. I like the Lego Star Wars humor, which is also very much an integral part of the games. But I don't know about you, but I always get a little bit oversaturated with the Lego stuff. After a while, it gets a bit old, because it's always the same type of humor. And so I never watched it until yesterday evening. And what I loved about it is that they basically told a story as if kids came up with the script. Doesn't mean that it's childish, but how do kids play with Star Wars Lego? They just put all the minifigures on the floor. I've seen this with my nephews when they were still young. They had a ton of Star Wars Lego, but they would play with all the timeline minifigures from different timelines all at once. They didn't care if Darth Vader was from a different era than I don't know, young Anakin Skywalker, or I don't know, like Rey would be able to fight Obi-Wan Kenobi or Qui-Gon Jinn. It's just everything was mixed up. And so they wanted to do something like that with the Star Wars holiday special. And so they came up with this story where Rey is opening a portal through time with an artifact, and she ends up in all these different moments in the Star Wars timeline. So moments in the prequels, moments in the original trilogy, and more recent events. In fact, the framework story is that they are all together. This takes place after the Rise of Skywalker chronology, which is interesting in itself. Of course, this is not canon, but it does already do something that we know later on will become very important in future Star Wars movies. Rey is trying to pass on what she has learned from Luke Skywalker himself, to pass that on to Finn. So Finn is trying to become a Jedi. And we know that in the movie that they have promised us for 2 years from now, that will be one of the major plot points, when Rey is trying to build a new order of Jedi. And so in this Lego, even though it's, again, not canon, she's trying to pass on what she has learned, but she fails. She doesn't know how to teach Finn properly. And because then she is sucked into this vortex of experiences in the past, where she constantly sees how Master Jedi work with their Padawans and teach them the Force. That is how ultimately she discovers something fundamental about this teacher-pupil, master-apprentice relationship. And I thought it was interesting to see that some of the ideas that are integrated in the holiday special have been used again in the Ahsoka series. I don't know if Dave Filoni was involved in this. I don't think so. But there are definitely a couple of things that I think at least had the same inspiration as the writers of the holiday special, but he did actually emphasize the same things in the master-apprentice relationship between Ahsoka and Sabine. And so I've found that refreshing to see that the traces were already there. The seeds of that storytelling were already there in the Lego holiday special. So I have found the trailer of the holiday special. Let's take a listen.
'Twas the night before Life Day, in a galaxy far, far away.
Looking good. Tree, food, decorations.
Coming together heroes were to celebrate the day.
Please be a cape. Please be a cape.
It's a wrap! For Rey, adventure called, and she thought it would be fast.
Wow.
But there she found a key to the galaxy's past.
Sorry. Oh, Master Luke.
What are you doing?
This is so cool. We've seen my master. My master's master.
Concentrate!
My master's father.
Impressive.
My master's father's master.
Emperor Palpatine? I don't believe it. You think maybe you could put a shirt on?
It's a key to travel across space and time.
I will change the future.
So sure are you?
Less talky, more fighty. Pod races. Jigs. Oh, double jigs.
So cute.
Ooh, gimme. Galaxy's best emperor. Meh.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
Music.
A time of joy. This is
Ray.
a friendship, a family.
Who are you guys?
Master Skywalker.
My son. I mean, these binary sons.
Gunta, solos? You want to shoot first? After you.
I mean, there were so many moments in this holiday special that I laughed out loud. There are lots and lots of hidden details and funny jokes. And there were a few where I was like, I bet you that almost no one has seen this joke. So there's this one moment where you see Rey and R2-D2. I'm just going to share this one with you, but otherwise you'll miss it. And then she's talking to R2, and it's, of course, since she's a Jedi, she can understand what R2 is saying. And then at one point, R2 is like, bleep, 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 bleep. And then Rey is, yeah, you can say that again. And then you hear in the sound that R2-D2 is repeating exactly the same bleep, 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 bleep. In other words, he's literally saying that again. And there's so many little details also in the background of stuff that you see playing. At one point that you have these two stormtroopers and they finish each other's sentences, you know where that comes from, of course. And then it's like, oh my gosh, it's almost as if we're the same. And then, duh, of course they're clones. So much fun. And in fact, I was very surprised. Of course, this is Lego animation, but it is insanely well done. And some of those Lego recreations of these traditional scenes, be it on Hoth or on Tatooine or earlier on Naboo or other planets, some of that stuff looks just amazingly good. My favorite scene was the chase through the trench of the Death Star. They recreated that entire sequence, and it is just as thrilling as the original. They even replicated the camera movements, but they injected so much Lego humor to it. Oh, if you've never seen it, definitely do yourself a favor and go watch it, because it's seriously one of the funniest Star Wars things I've seen this year, and maybe at all. It's a brilliant masterpiece, I think, but also in terms of animation, very, very funny. And yeah, it is now a true holiday favorite of mine, and I know that I'm going to rewatch this next year. In fact, this even tempts me to go and get that little Lego set that is available, and they're having a sale right now at the Lego store, where it's the interior of the Millennium Falcon. It's just one of those dioramas, and you see some of the Star Wars figures around a turkey, which is not a turkey in the Star Wars universe. They have another name for it. I forgot what it was. And of course they're going to cut the turkey with a lightsaber. And out of context, I was like, okay, I don't understand this diorama. I don't know why Lego would try to market this, because it's just such a weird combination, all this Christmas imagery plus Star Wars. But now that I've seen the special, I was like, oh yes, it is totally from the holiday special, including these awful Star Wars, pullovers that they have, the red ones and the green ones, and one has the Death Star on it. It's just amazing. It's so funny.
The most beloved fantasy story of all time. It is the tale of a small hobbit and the great wizard who appeared to him one day.
All right, dude, check it out. Go like that way, and then up this one mountain, and then kill all the hippies you come across.
No, I'm searching for a dragon's treasure.
I'm the wizard, you're the dwarf, and you will respect my authority.
I am no dwarf.
I was reading a very interesting blog post the other day about The Lord of the Rings being also one of those Christmas traditions. If you don't know what to watch during the Christmas holiday, why not rewatch the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy? And an additional reason to do that is that, in fact, The Lord of the Rings is a bit of a Advent Christmas type of story. It was, of course, never meant as a metaphor or anything, but it does have a number of major themes that are very much rooted, I think, in Tolkien's own faith. And of course, it's like salvation comes in the form of this small guy who is carrying the ring of evil and destroys it, just like Jesus was just this small child who takes on his shoulders the weight of sin and ultimately destroys it by sacrificing himself. So there are lots and lots of obvious parallels between Tolkien's faith in the true meaning of Christmas and the story he tells in The Lord of the Rings. Another thing that I really enjoyed of that article, I tried to find it online, I hope I bookmarked it, was it also, I think, makes a very good point, saying that the original trilogy is actually the one to watch, so not the extended one. Of course, the extended one has a lot of extra content, but it's just more of the same. And if you're a super fan like me, you don't mind dwelling in Middle-earth a little bit longer. But the article goes on to show that, in fact, the special editions do break the pace of the movie, and there is a lot of stuff in there that could have been and should have been left out, and was actually left out in the originals. And so another reason to watch the original cut of the Lord of the Rings movies is that that's 9 hours. You can watch that in one day. I don't recommend it, but you could. Whereas if you watch the extended editions, then it's like, unless you only sleep 4 hours. I once actually watched all these movies in one sitting in a local theater, and it was so hard to stay awake during the third movie. I don't think I did, but it was just too long. And that was actually just the original cut. So that is, I don't know if I will have time, but I am tempted to do that too. It's been a couple of years since I watched The Lord of the Rings. And as a trilogy, it's so much better, of course, than the later Hobbit trilogy, which was conceived as a 2-movie story, and then Guillermo del Toro, who was supposed to direct it, stepped back, and Peter Jackson, knowing how many jobs depended on this project, decided to step in and to expand the movie even to 3 movies. But it was just actually too much, too little butter on too many pieces of toast. However, again, I'm a super fan, so I don't mind it. I just, any occasion I have to dwell in the world of Lord of the Rings and the world of The Hobbit, I don't mind. But yes, the original trilogy is very, very special to me. So I'm talking about this because last week I actually went to an exposition in Rome about J.R.R. Tolkien and about the process of creating Middle-earth. And I saw this by accident. I was going to the Vatican in the metro, and while I was going up the escalator, I saw a poster and it said Tolkien Exposition. And so I Googled it immediately, and I noticed that there was an exposition running from November until February about Tolkien. It was the biggest Tolkien exposition that was ever organized in Italy. And it was in the Museum of Modern Arts, which is a museum I've never visited because it's really focusing on contemporary art. However, Tolkien and his work, you could consider that as contemporary art. I looked it up. It was only $10. Like, admission price was only $10, and you get to see the entire museum. I only had a few hours. I went there on the last day that I was in Rome, so I had about 2 hours to watch the entire exposition, and it was different from what I expected. In fact, there's a video online. I will play it. I think it's a bit of a trailer, meant as an Italian trailer for the exposition. And it shows, among other things, the opening day where I think the Prime Minister of Italy, who she is a big Tolkien fan, you see her visiting the exposition. You hear a few snippets of interviews. But I felt it overpromised and underdelivered in a sense that the exposition itself was a lot about Tolkien and his family history, but it didn't show much of the process of creating Middle-earth. There were hardly any manuscripts. I expected to see pages, on display, or maybe even the drawings that he made. No, in fact, it was all kind of derivative stuff. So you saw lots of photos, but a lot of them I had already seen elsewhere. You can read, and then every once in a while they would show like a book that he had given. For instance, one of the things I had forgotten was that his brother was a Catholic priest. And so his sister gives his brother, on the day of his priestly ordination, a book, also on behalf of Tolkien, of J.R.R. Tolkien, and they sign it. And then you see actually the handwriting of J.R.R. Tolkien. So that's cool. I was like, oh, that is a relic of Tolkien. But for instance, all the drawings, it is an art exposition. So it featured a lot of the artwork, but a lot of it was made by Italian artists for Italian editions of the book. And a lot of the artwork that they had on display was never published because it was rejected artwork and they went for another cover. So there were a few interesting, there were like 2 rooms with paintings and drawings, and one of them was from Alan Lee. So that was the only, like, okay, I know this artist, but then a lot of other artists, I don't know. There is also a part where they have a few costumes. So I got first excited about it. Oh my gosh, I'm going to see the props that they used in the movies. And then when I saw it, they were redone. There were replicas of the original costume. So they weren't even the real ones. And they stuffed them in a room where they basically only had leftover stuff. It's like, okay, we don't know. We have this pinball machine that is Tolkien themed. Let's put it next to the costumes. And I'm thinking, yeah, you guys just really ran out of inspiration here in terms of the exposition. That was one thing that was very cool. You see Tolkien's desk and his chair in which he sat while he was writing the Lord of the Ring. And as you know, he wrote everything by hand. He had a very chaotic working style, and I saw a TikTok video also. There's this guy who is what's his name? Tom Ayling, and he's an antiquarian, a bookseller, and he's got a shop not far from Heathrow in England, and he has a TikTok series, and he talks a lot about the Tolkien books that he has, and so he had this video about how much work Christopher Tolkien had to put into organizing his father's work. It was such a chaotic man. And it's mostly thanks to Christopher's painstaking work that we have all these books now neatly reproduced and organized and ordered. Christopher Tolkien, I think, for the legacy of Tolkien, is just as important as his father. He's really underappreciated, I think. So, why did I talk about that, about Christopher Tolkien and about the artwork? I don't know. So anyway, let me play the audio of the Italian video that promotes this exposition. So there's going to be some Italian in there. Tolkien, uomo, professore, autore. Man, professor, and author. They opened the doors. They're still working here in the video on setting up the exposition.
Emozione tantissima, ma anche la preoccupazione, insomma, che tutto sia in perfetto ordine. Siamo a poche ore, quindi c'è bisogno, ecco, di avere maggiore attenzione poi ai dettagli.
Non tocca a noi dominare tutte le maree del mondo. Il nostro compito è di fare il possibile per la salvezza degli anni nei quali viviamo, sradicando il male dai campi che conosciamo, al fine di lasciare a coloro che verranno dopo terra sana e pulita da coltivare.
So they want to show the beauty of Tolkien's work, etc., etc. A lot of the
una mostra molto ben pensata.
Colpisce particolarmente la ricchezza.
Finalmente si racconta la storia di un autore molto spesso dimenticato.
It's a very special work.
Ci avviciniamo a questo mondo fantastico.
We're getting closer to this fantastic world.
Voglio ritornarci assolutamente. Ho iniziato proprio a viaggiare.
I absolutely want to return.
Tanti visitatori possono venire a
We expect so many visitors to visit this exposition of Tolkien. So it's like, how do you say so much without saying anything? I will include a link to this video because you actually see everything that I've seen while I was at the exposition. So what you see is what you get. Anyway, Tolkien, this is still in Rome. So if you go to Rome before February 11th, definitely worth it. I mean, it's just $10. What are we talking about? I loved actually just seeing all that stuff, and I don't know, it just put me in a mood to read more Tolkien, and that, of course, in itself is a very, very good thing. I have made a couple of photos. I did not record a podcast during my visit, so this is not part of the Catholic Insider series, but I did take some photos, and maybe I'll include some of them on the Patreon website. So keep an eye on that as well. Even if you're not a patron, you know, you can go to Patreon and still join the community, the Patreon community, and get access to everything I publish on Patreon for free as well. Well, not everything, but what I publish is available to anyone who signs up to the Patreon community. So that was Tolkien. I really didn't expect to be at this conference. Or to see this exposition while I was in Rome. I wasn't there for this exposition, but when I discovered it, I was so glad that I was able to go watch it. I did one other thing when I was in Rome, and it has to do with anime, or it is linked to anime.
Japanimation.
Yeah.
Cool.
And this is something I also did on that last day that I was in Rome, very close to the college where I stayed, the College of Saint Norbert. There is a big area that is fenced off, and I'd never visited. The only thing I knew was that there were the remains of old Roman bathhouses, the Baths of Caracalla, I Thermae di Caracalla. And I just didn't know much about them, and I figured, from the outside, you just see, broken down, just old stones, what, and it's about a bunch of baths. What could be interesting about that? But this year, I actually had a reason to go check it out, and the reason is actually an anime series that I've discovered. You know that anime is one of my biggest media discoveries of this past year. I've really started to appreciate the variety, and there's this one series that I came across on Netflix, of all places. They have actually a pretty good anime collection nowadays, and it was a series that was based on ancient Rome, and it tells the story of a guy who is working in the Roman time, so around the time of the birth of Jesus in the city of Rome. And I think he works for Marcus Aurelius, but I'm not sure. Yes, I think that was it. And he works for Marcus Aurelius, of course, one of the most famous Caesars or emperors, a Stoic also. And Marcus Aurelius wants this architect to create new baths for the general populace of the city, which is actually something that he did at the time. The Baths of Caracalla are built much later. They're built, I think, they were opened in the 4th century, if I'm not mistaken, still pretty old. But the tradition of having these public baths for everyone has been around in ancient Rome for multiple centuries. And so the story in the anime tells about this architect who is then tasked by the emperor, make me some new baths, and he's out of inspiration. He's just like, I don't know what to do. I've already created so many swimming pools. I don't know what to do. And then he, in order to relax and to just think about, get new ideas, he steps into the water of one of his own swimming pools or baths, and he gets sucked into a time travel vortex. I'm not kidding you. And it's so weird. And then he ends up, when he steps out of the water, all of a sudden he's in modern day Tokyo in Japan, in a bathhouse. And he looks around, he's like, oh my gosh, and he sees all these new inventions. And every episode is about the same time travel. So he travels back and forth between his own time and modern day Japan, gets inspired by something he sees in one of these bathhouses in Japan, and then tries to replicate it in ancient Rome. And it's so well done. It sounds totally over the top, I know, but it is extremely well executed. The creator is a huge admirer of archaeology, and you can tell because the way in which they portray Rome is very close to, it's really based on archaeological data. So you do learn a lot about the Roman times just by watching this anime series. The anime series itself is called Thermae Romae Novae, and it's based, originally, the anime is based on a manga, so on a comic book series. And the anime itself is actually quite close to the original manga. Let's listen to the audio of the trailer, and it's all going to be in Japanese. On Netflix, I mean, this is one of the things that I love about Japanese anime. It can be basically anything, and I've got the feeling that they don't do all this deliberation like, can we revive an old franchise? Like, there's not much rehashing of ideas. It's the more original, the better. And what I really loved is while I was walking around among the ruins of the Thermae di Caracalla, I actually recognized the stuff that I had seen in the anime series. So that was a very special experience. Another thing that made that special, that visit to the bathhouse of Caracalla so special, was that they had VR helmets, or what is it, like these headsets that you put on, and you look around and you don't see the ruins, but you see what it actually looked like, and you can look around, and that was very immersive, very cool. It was kind of old-fashioned AR. I mean, it wasn't truly 3D. It was a bit like the room was basically 2D, but because everything's so far away, you don't notice that it is 2D. But it's still projected in a sphere all around you, so you move your head, and actually, it's as if you're standing there. And I've never experienced something like that before. But now I'm thinking they should do this everywhere in Rome, and maybe also in Greece. It is such an enhancement of your experience, because once you put the visor down, you then exactly know how to interpret the runes, because you've seen what it looked like in Roman times. And it was so close to what I see in the anime as well. So it was a lot of fun. If you want to check it out, it's on Netflix. I suppose it's available on Netflix in most countries where Netflix is available. Again, it's called Thermae Romae Novae. And with that, it is the end of this episode of The Break. As I said, there is one more episode coming later this week, and that is the end of the year, New Year's Eve extravaganza, in which we will go over all the cool stuff that we experienced this past year. So stay tuned for that. And if you're a patron, of course, there's going to be a little bit longer show for you waiting in your own private feed that you get when you become a patron, the premium episode. So we'll talk a little bit more about Rome, some of the very good food that I tried out in Rome, and I've got some experiences to share about filming in 3D as well, because I used the iPhone with this brand new function to create 3D videos for when the Apple Vision Pro comes out. And most recent rumors say that the Apple Vision Pro actually will already be shipped in January of the next year. I can't wait. I really hope that Apple will introduce that device very quickly, because of course we're all waiting for the next iteration, which will be more affordable, lighter, and better. So I'm really having high hopes for this device, and it was very cool to already record some 3D memories of Rome for that one day when I will be able to use that Apple Vision Pro myself. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Merry Christmas. All right, and now we move over to the premium part of the show. If you're watching this live, of course, you get a glimpse of the premium show. Let's see. Yeah, we're good to go.
Why are you wearing glasses?
Reading.
Reading? I didn't know you could read.
This is the final sprint to the end of the year, and it is very similar to the past 2 years, in the sense that you know that I set myself an impossible reading goal for 2023. Last year, 2022, I read 100 books, which was very demanding. And I remember in the last week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, I basically read books nonstop just to be able to finish the list, because I had fallen behind. This year, I was actually on schedule, and I set the bar a little bit higher. I wanted to read 150 books this year, and so far so good. There were a few moments in the summertime when I fell behind, but then I read some extra books and I was catching up, so I was on schedule. And then I got the idea, why don't I go to Rome for 7 days? And so for 7 days, I didn't read a single book, which now means that between Christmas and New Year's Eve, I had to read 12 books. It's a lot. But I'm powering through. I am determined. This is just one of these things. It's like closing the rings on my Apple Watch. I will do it. And I will read day and night if necessary, but I will read those 150 books. I read a couple of very big books as well this year, which is also different from last year, where I mainly stayed, in the, between 200 and 400 pages books. But this year I read a couple that were like 500, 600 pages per book. So it's just a number, of course. It doesn't really, it's not really about the pages. And some people may say, well, I'd rather just read books that I enjoy instead of fixing a certain number. And good for you. That's perfectly fine. But for me, this works because it forces me to go and scout for books. What's the next book? Which 5 books am I going to read this week? And it helps me discover so much good stuff. Now, for this last week, what have I been reading in this final race to the finish line? Actually, quite a few very cool books. I'm working quite hard on something I shared with you before, which is a big project for next year, which is me helping parishes and individuals to improve their social media communication. Of course, I've been formed in Rome in social communications. This is very much something that I, after my time in Rome, started to put into practice with podcasting, with YouTube, TikTok, and so much other stuff. So I have, you could easily say, 25 years of experience online in online communication. And next year, I want to help others to improve their own communications. studying how to set up a coaching enterprise, because I also want that to be a way to support the rest of my primary mission, which is to do this, to do podcasting, to make TikTok videos, and to reach a generation of people that have little knowledge of faith or, of the tradition of the Catholic Church. And for me, building bridges is super important, but I also have realized that primary audience is not going to be able to facilitate my mission financially. And so for that, I'm thinking coaching might be the perfect solution. I'm helping others, and it can also create a source of revenue that will make my work sustainable for the next couple of years. And so I've been reading a lot of books about coaching because I of course know how to teach. I know my work. I know communication. I have a lot of experience, but there is also another dimension in coaching which has to do with how do you set that up? How do you find clients? How do you what's the infrastructure behind the coaching? What kind of coach do you want to be? What kind of questions work well? So I'm studying a lot of books about the coaching process as such and coaching infrastructure, so to say. And of course, that is an ongoing work. I don't think I can master that in a couple of weeks. It sometimes takes years for people to find out what works for them. But I've already learned so much. While I was in Rome, I was actually reading some books about coaching and also about marketing, because that's also part of it. How do you get the word out? If I use my existing channels, like YouTube and TikTok, that's not the audience that is interested in coaching. On the other hand, the audience that I'm trying to reach and that I can help is not necessarily part of my existing community. It's a different group of people. And so how can I target that particular audience? How can I reach parishes and make them aware of the importance to get better at communication? Because that's ultimately my drive. Is when I look at the way the church is communicating right now, even in the Vatican, but even worse, I would say, in certain parishes, it cannot measure up to the incredible competition of other content creators. And we need to up our game because the message that we want to spread in the world is worth it. I've always used this metaphor like we are wrapping a treasure in toilet paper, or in old newspapers. And we shouldn't. We should turn it in. Our communication should be extremely well produced, and because the content is so valuable. So, but learning how to set that up, how to, what is the best way to get that communication going with these potential clients, etc. That's what I've been studying. So I read a really good set of books by a Dutch copywriter called Art-Jan van Erkel. And he wrote one book that's called Turn Them Crazy, How to Attract a Notable Amount of Clients with Online Marketing. And he also wrote the book Number One, This is How You Become the Best Known Name in Your Market and How to Get Clients for Life. Very long titles. And the thing that really struck a chord with me is that he says, if you want to be the best in your how do you say that? In your market, you have to be different. You have to stand out. You have to be original, and you have to be yourself. So don't try to copy what other people do. You become the best coach in your area of interest because you are the one who is doing the coaching. So emphasize your own perspective on things, and don't do what a lot of other people do. And it's that you write a very generic email newsletter like once every 3 months. It's never going to fly. He actually says, if you really want to do this well, you should email people every single day. However, I know that a lot of you is like, every single day. Oh my goodness, I hate email newsletters. I don't like being bombarded. But then he says, but you don't market in those newsletters. You entertain, you tell stories, you give little nuggets. And yes, there can be a pitch at the end, but the email itself should be something that people are looking forward to. And then I was thinking, of course, I don't think it would be wise for me to start a daily newsletter. But it did make me think about, so how am I telling my stories? One of his major points, and this is something that's a big takeaway for me, is if you want to connect with future clients, you have to be in their face as much as possible. Don't think, but if I am too much in their inbox, or if I create too much content, they're going to get sick of it. In fact, the people that will reject it, that will unsubscribe from the newsletter, will never become clients. So he is very much about curating your communication and to establish this ongoing communication with your clients, and even with former clients. Like if people have, and this made me think about my own patrons. You know, of course, every month I have new patrons, and I have people that for whatever reason cannot support me financially anymore. But what I'm realizing is that I should also find ways to stay in contact with those former patrons. It's not that, well, you know, they've given up. No, they might actually come back after a while, as long as you keep in touch. And how can I do that in a way that is not obnoxious, that is not pushy, but is the way I am? And that is just, I like to tell stories. I like to share what I'm passionate about. How can I translate that into a strategy? Anyway, so that's a lot of stuff that I've been reading is about marketing and about email marketing and about coaching. I also read a number of fictional books, and I saw the other day that there was a new series. I think it's on Amazon Prime, but I'm not certain. With the Lee Child's character of Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is the central fictional character of a lot of novels, where it's all about kind of a bit of a detective type of stories, who did it. But the main character is this very tall guy. He's almost like 2 meters tall, very strong. And there's always a lot of fighting, but it's always against bad guys. So it's a, you know, it's not literature. It's definitely not like Oscar-worthy material on TV, but it is entertaining. And so I noticed that there was a new series about Jack Reacher that got pretty decent reviews, in contrast with this one movie that came out a couple of years ago, where they had chosen Tom Cruise to play Jack Reacher. And the entire Jack Reacher fan base got so upset that it was almost the end of the entire franchise, because the story is supposed to be about this guy who is so special because he's so tall. And then they pick Tom Cruise, who is like Hobbit-sized, you know, where they have to literally put the cameraman on his knees to make him seem taller, where Tom Cruise, in almost every movie where he talks to other people, he is standing literally on a soapbox, because all his other fellow players are much taller than he is, and he needs to look them in the eye. And so once you know that he's so small, you start to notice it in every movie. Like, I cannot watch Mission Impossible without thinking, oh, yep, he must be standing on something. Oh, yep, the eye line. They found a way to film it in such a way that you don't notice how small this guy is. But why pick him to play Jack Reacher? So anyway, I have not seen the new series yet. I have also not seen the Tom Cruise movie. But I wanted to get an idea of this character by reading some of the novels. So I read about, how many did I read? 3 or 4 Jack Reacher novels. And now I see why they're so popular. Because it's, you know, it's inconsequential books. It's nothing super memorable. But it is so entertaining. It just reads very well. And every story has still... it motivates you to turn the page and see how it ends and how is this going to resolve. And sometimes it's really good, and other times it's a bit like, yeah, that was a bit quick, and that was a bit too lazy in the way that they, you know, don't expect like big revelations, or even character growth is not really present. The books are not about that. The books are just about entertainment and, you know, a good military story, or a good whodunit crime, and then a bit of brawling, a bit of fighting. It is, yeah, it's not for everyone, but I definitely see the appeal. And now with this background, having read a couple of these books, I feel like I'm going to enjoy the television series much more. So that's what I've been reading. And what am I currently reading? Yesterday evening, I read a book about cats, which was so funny. It's not available in English. It's written by a very famous biologist in the Netherlands. And his observations about cat behavior, he's very much a cat person, are so relatable. Even though I don't have a cat, but I know people with cats. I do a lot of cat research, aka there are usually like half of the videos that I watch on YouTube are cat videos. So it was such a joy to read, and also funny to learn so much about cat behavior and how much oftentimes we project things on cats that are actually just human translations of what we think cats are doing or thinking. And none of that is true, of course. So very entertaining. It's really, I still have to read about 6 books, I think, and I've got 4 days left. So I'm good. I'm going to make it. But I need to stay on target. Stay on target. And with that, let's talk food. Not Star Trek. Food. No, I don't have a food jingle.
I need help.
You need a teacher. I can't teach you.
Maybe the internet has the information I need.
You know what I learned from the internet?
I understand that you learned a few new things.
There really is so much to learn.
All right, let's put everything under the things I've discovered on the internet or in real life section. I thought I had a food jingle, but it's probably in one of the other jingle sets. Anyway, so speaking about food, when I'm in Rome, I tend to go to restaurants that I already know. And in the past, I beat myself up about it. It's like, well, why don't you go and explore other restaurants? And now I know that this is also probably linked to the fact that I have ADHD, and there is a certain comfort. It gives me stress to go to new restaurants. It gives me stress to have to decide certain menu, and I don't know what it's going to be. And when I'm on vacation, especially at the end of the day, I am done. I don't have energy anymore to make choices. So it feels very familiar. As I always go to Carlo Menta, and once every week that I'm in Rome, I go to a Chinese restaurant where I went as a student, and I eat there because I just know what they have. I know what I like. I also I didn't blame myself anymore for ordering the same menu 3 times this past week. Like, they have various entrees, and it's all the same price. So you could choose between an amatriciana, a piece of lasagna, a penne with the basil, whatever, and the carbonara. The carbonara is so good. So I ordered it once, and the second time I was sitting in the same restaurant, I was like, well, now I cannot order carbonara anymore because it would be, it's a waste of opportunity if I don't try the other menu items. But then I was like, I don't feel like lasagna, amatriciana, it's tomato-based. I make a lot of similar pasta myself. There's this one thing, the carbonara, that is a lot of work, and that's why I never make it for myself. And I was like, you know what? I am here to enjoy the food. I enjoy carbonara, so I'm just going to order carbonara again. And the third time, I went for carbonara. So a guilt-free carbonara extravaganza. And I love it. I was like, okay, I finally know why I like this. This is literally comfort food. And if I like it, who cares that I'm not trying everything out on the menu? I just happen to like this. Same thing with a dessert. You can choose between a crème brûlée or what is it? Like kind of a vanilla cream thing, a little pudding, or just a piece of cake, just traditional Italian cake. I'm not a cake person. No. I do like the crème brûlée. That was actually quite nice. So I went for that 3 times in a row. No, I did get the cake once and then immediately regretted it because I was like, it's so sweet and it's tiny and it just doesn't feel like dessert. For me, cake is work. It's like very close to just eating a sandwich as a dessert. It's like, why? It's just not my thing. I know that your mileage may vary, but for me, cake is just a chore. It's not something I enjoy. So, guilt-free, I just went for the same dessert. And then, of course, I knew that was just first dessert. But in my life, you also have second dessert, especially if you're in Rome, because you know that I had to make the pilgrimage to the gelateria on the right side of the Vatican, the old bridge. And I went there only twice. Only twice. I was extremely restrained. But it was unforgettable. That ice cream is so incredibly good. They had some new flavors. So there, the advantage is I don't have to choose because everything is good. And so I just asked the guy behind the counter, what is good? What do you have? And he said, there's this one thing. It's this, what was it? Cheesecake flavor. Very good. And then he had this vanilla, I forgot what it was. It was pistachio, but it was done with some cream instead of it wasn't a traditional pistachio. So he made me, the second time I went there, like a combination of his favorite flavors. And I was like, this is literally the best ice cream I've ever tasted. The cheesecake especially was insanely good. I don't know if it tasted like cheesecake, but it had all these little bits in it, and it was just, it was like fireworks in your mouth. It was so incredibly good. I'm getting hungry thinking of it. So, it was incredible. And then there's one thing I asked my followers. I was posting stories on Patreon for tips. What else should I eat? And then someone said you should try these fried balls filled with rice, and didn't ring a bell. And someone else said it's called, I think, a soupli, and I discovered that actually in a restaurant. So I had soupli, and what it is actually it's a fried ball. It looks terrible from the outside. It's a bit greasy. It's just this ball of fried whatever. But then when you taste it, it is so good because it's made with the same type of rice you use in a risotto. So it's kind of sticky rice. Then they put in a piece of mozzarella, which completely melts when it's deep fried, and also tomato sauce, like the same kind of sauce you would use in a lasagna or, So it is this, like the interior just melts in your mouth, and the combination of the crunch and that very soft, super cheesy interior, it is so good. It's so good. Apparently there's also an even bigger variant which they eat on Sicily. I bet you can also order it in Rome in certain restaurants. It's called an arancino, which literally means an orange because it's slightly bigger, and they put in the same ingredients as the soupli, but they add beef and peas. So I haven't tried that out. That's still on my list. So now I'm super hungry. Let's move on. What else did I discover this week? I said that I tried out 3D cinematography for the first time while I was in Rome. I used the two lenses that are on the same level at the back of my iPhone 15 and the new camera software of Apple to create 3D videos. And there was one thing that I knew in advance that I had to make sure I did, and that is in order to have convincing 3D, you need to have stuff in the foreground. So normally when you're, for instance, looking at the Forum Romanum, which is, this beautiful view that you have from on top of the Campidoglio, you oversee the Forum Romanum. If I would just film that in 3D with nothing in the foreground, you don't have the same depth. So what I always try to take out of the photos, which is kind of the fence, for instance, in front of the view, or like the lanterns on the side of the nativity scene on St. Peter's Square, I always try to move my camera so that's not in frame. Or people, this time I knew that if I want to enhance the 3D effect, I need to have stuff in the foreground. So when I was filming at the Forum Romanum, I made sure that the camera moved from the fence to the view so that if you're watching this later on in your Apple Vision Pro, the first stuff you see establishes that 3D space, and then it doesn't matter if you go beyond, the things in the foreground disappear at one point. Your brain will still perceive it as 3D. And on St. Peter's Square, it was even easier because, of course, as you can imagine, lots and lots of people were watching and taking photos and selfies in front of the nativity scene. So I always had people in the foreground, which I think is going to be a fantastic effect in 3D. Now, of course, you cannot see this in 3D on your phone. It just looks like a regular video. It even edits like regular video. This is one of the reasons that I filmed everything I filmed. I did it in the Apple Vision Pro format because I knew that I can always use it as 2D footage as well. It's not 4K. I think that will probably come in the iPhone 16 where they will increase the quality. So you're limited to 1080p, 30 frames per second. So also the frame rate is fixed. You cannot film in 24 frames per second, which is what I usually do when I'm filming because that's the kind of the cinematic convention. 30 frames per second gives a much more fluent motion, for instance, which I think helps with the immersion. Just before I went to Rome, I saw a number of articles by journalists who had been allowed to film their own 3D stuff and then rewatch it in the Apple Vision Pro, and all of them said it was amazing. There's something extremely visceral, extremely real about seeing your own images in 3D. Of course, Apple also has demo stuff, and that always looks great. But to see something you have seen with your own eyes and then watch it back in the Apple Vision Pro, for almost every journalist that has had that experience, they said, this is so worth it. This is almost a killer app. And so I knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was in Rome during the Christmas season with the best weather imaginable, like during the day, blue skies, sunshine. In the evening, very dark. Like it gets dark very early in Rome. So and it wasn't raining. There was no wind. Perfect weather for filming. So I filmed as much as I could in 3D. No story. I didn't talk over it. Of course, you cannot film yourself. All that is still, it's very limited what you can do. I also realized I should have brought a stabilizer because in regular video, you can turn on stabilization. You can't do that with 3D filming. It's very much, it uses the sensor as is, probably for resolution purposes. So next time I'm going to bring myself one of the gimbals that I have to make sure that it becomes even more smoother. But I'm super excited that I have already started to use 3D. And I've had this one 3D camera years and years ago. I brought it to Madrid when Pope Benedict came to Madrid for World Youth Day. And I used that camera to film also in 3D. And I rewatched that on my 3D television, and it still holds up pretty well. The lenses are similar to the ones that I've currently got on my phone. But since these lenses are very close to one another, in order for the parallax effect to work really well, it's vital to have things right in front of the camera. And the further stuff is away from the camera, the more it will flatten out, just because these lenses are not very close or too close to one another compared to regular 3D cameras. So anyway, I love 3D, and now I have another reason to start saving for the Apple Vision Pro. I can't wait to try out that thing for myself. I'm also on the fence when it comes to technology about the Meta Quest, because the Meta Quest can also be used as a remote VR headset for 3D games on a PC. So and of course it's 1/7 of the price that you would pay for Apple. And apparently one of the games that came out on the Quest 3 it's an RPG game that you play in 3D. And apparently it is the best RPG ever made. People that have played it, it's like, regardless of the VR, this is better than Skyrim. And that made me very curious. And it's, again, univocal. All the reviewers say this is one of the best. It's like, I forgot about the name. And some people like it even more than Baldur's Gate. And that's a huge compliment. So now I'm thinking like, And the thing is, I mentioned this because you get that for free until January. It comes with the Quest for free. And I already have a couple of games for the Quest. I have the original Quest. I skipped the Quest 2. And those games are also backwards compatible. So I'm so tempted. I love 3D. But the Apple is also coming out. And of course, Apple is doing things even better than Quest. So I don't know. Well, we'll sleep on it. Hey, that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And of course, I'll be back with one final end of the year episode of The Break. before we head into the new year. There's also a new episode of The Walk waiting for you. And if you're a patron, there are extra episodes as well. I hear that someone is at my front door, so I'm going to let the music play out and open the door. And we'll talk very soon. God bless. Talk to you later.